Hello. Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? Good. I like the first session. Everyone's still got energy. People aren't crashing yet. However, I am incredibly jet lagged. So if I fall asleep, just give me a nudge. I'll be okay. We'll be fine. So, yes, as I said, I want to talk about this thing called Genie. Oh, my clicker's lost focus. There we go. So, yes, your wish is AI command. I want to talk about this whole idea of how you do AI enhanced, AI augmented BI. How you get people to go and talk to data using a ChatGPT stuff. Now, there's the usual slides, forward-looking statements, Databricks take no legal responsibility for anything I tell you. So I think that's fine. You'll see those slides a lot. There's a survey. So afterwards, please give feedback in. It helps me, helps everyone else. And yeah, speaking of that, who am I? My name's Simon. Hello. I run a consultancy in the UK called Advancing Analytics. I also do a lot of YouTube. So if you like having English people rant about tech, that's what you can go and do. There's plenty of me chatting on the internet. So I thought I would keep this like not controversial, right? I don't want to offend everyone. I want to keep it just, a nice gentle session, which is why I thought I'd start with that statement, right? Dashboards are dead. Has anyone seen that out in marketing currently? I've seen it a lot. And just for context, I thoroughly disagree. Dashboards aren't going anywhere. But a lot of the marketing, a lot of the hype, a lot of what people are talking about is, oh, we've got a new way of talking to data. We can throw out everything we used to. We don't need that anymore. And I fundamentally disagree. This is just a new tool. It's another thing that we have in our utility belt of things that we can work with. But why would we need anything? What are the problems with dashboards we can talk about? And well, why would we need anything new? We've had dashboards for 30 years. Why do we need to reinvent the wheel? Well, there's challenges. So if I've done my job properly as a data BI analyst kind of person, I've done some kind of scorecard, high-level dashboard. But then if someone has a deeper question, if someone looks at something and says, but what about that? I have to go and provision a load of deeper reports, right? So there's a spiraling number of different dashboards and reports and drill downs and things that I have to create to kind of preempt all the different questions people are going to have. So if I'm trying to just completely self-serve, I want to allow people to just go and answer their own questions. There's a huge amount of work I need to do to kind of lay that groundwork, to kind of give them the tools they need for that. Now, that's just not going to work, right? That doesn't solve every problem. So you then have this whole workflow of what does someone do with a dashboard if they want to do some of their own analysis? They put it in Excel, as much as everyone hates it. Or they go and write some SQL, or they go and get someone else to write some SQL for them, right? There's a workflow, there's a delay. I have to go and ask my data analyst to go and put something together to answer the question and come back to me. And so I'm not really answering my question. You think about curiosity. You look at something and you go, oh, I wonder if I then have to wait a day to get the answer for it, my natural curiosity's kind of died. Whereas if I could go, what about that? Oh, what about that? And you explore it, it's a very different scenario. So these are the reasons why people are having to think about different things, why we need a different solution. It's a growing thing. And honestly, there's some people who just don't like dashboards. I've spoken to a load of execs who you give them a dashboard and it's perfect and it's crafted and you've done all this theory to make sure it's as accessible as possible. And they go, I don't want to look at data. That's a data person's job. Sadly, that is something that happens. So yeah, there's reasons why we need to evolve. There's a bunch of problems with dashboards as they are, as much as we love them. The requirements keep spiraling and we need to build all these extra different ones. Yes, if I have to dip outside of the dashboards, this is a long turnaround time. People to build their own things. You need a bit of SQL, a bit of Python. Yeah, you can vibe code some dashboards these days, but it's not entirely great. And you kind of have to work within the boundaries of what someone has designed for you. So that's why there's this big push towards doing something different. Now, we haven't quite settled on a term yet. Some people call it Gen BI, Generative BI, which hurts me inside, but I do use. Some people call it conversational analytics. Essentially, using ChatGPT with your data, using some kind of large language model to be able to interact with your data at real time. It's this kind of flow. I want someone to come in, ask a question, that to go away, look at my data, and give me the results. Now that, as a high level, kind of makes sense. And all those execs who hate dashboards, for some reason, have fallen in love with ChatGPT and are perfectly happy to ask questions of their data in natural language because it doesn't feel like they're doing data work. So yeah, different audience, a whole different group of people are happy to work in this way. So great. If I've got an extra tool I can use to engage a wider data audience, fantastic. It's the thing that data people always want. But it's not actually quite that easy, because ChatGPT doesn't know anything about my data. I can sling, if I go to OpenAI, if I go to Llama, if I just pick any large language model, it has no clue what my data is actually doing. So I have to find a way to get it to do that. And actually what we're seeing is things like Genie are not actually looking at my data. What they're doing is it's essentially a SQL writer. It is a natural language to SQL generating tool. So it's going through a bunch of steps. It looks at the question I've asked, tries to understand what that actually means in the context of my data. It generates a SQL query for me, so it will write that SQL. It then passes it back to me in Databricks and automatically executes it. So the large language model isn't running that query. Large language model isn't seeing my data. It's just generating some SQL, and I'm executing it, and I see the results. It just feels like the large language model's doing it for me, just because it's wrapped in that nice UI and it's all automated. So a lot of the conversational analytics, a lot of the Gen BI style tools are doing this. They are query generators that save you time to write queries. They're not necessarily passing the data in. Now that's important for when you think about how you're going to use it. Because if you ask it why is that figure different? Well, it doesn't know. Because the large language model doesn't actually see your data. It just sees the schema and it writes a query for you. It can't explain, it can't put it in context, it can't analyze the results for you. If you get that in your head, you'll have a great time with Genie. It's the only kind of thing to get careful with going, it's not actually understanding your data. It's understanding your structure and writing queries for you. Make sense? Cool. So, yeah, so what does it actually look like? We can do a super quick example of what we're going to see. We'll go and build one in a minute, but we'll do something a bit fancier. It is this kind of chatbot kind of thing. I have something that looks and feels like any of the other large language chat model kind of things I've got. I've got some data in there. Most importantly, I can seed it with some questions. Now, I don't know how well this translates to a US audience. There's a show in the UK called Gladiators, which is horrendously cheesy, and you get big bodybuilders in spandex competing for various things. I think there is a US version, but it's currently having a revival in the UK. So I grabbed some stats, and I'll show you how I did this. But the whole idea is you get someone to come into this room, they're engaging with data in a particular domain space, and they're asking questions of it. And you can seed it, you seed their imagination. Here's some kind of questions you can answer. Because honestly, if you give someone a blank page and go, ask questions, they're going to go, I don't know what to ask. Like, what kind of questions? What can I do? So to put it in context and say, here's a little teaser to wet your whistle. Here's some kind of things to get you started. We can get on with that. So I can go, well, which gladiator played the most games? So I could have typed that out, just click one of the pre-ones. It's going to look at that query. It's going to look at a load of metadata. It's going to figure out how it stitches it together. It's going to write some SQL code for me and then automatically run it. The same as if I took that SQL code, just ran it against a Databricks SQL warehouse, it gives me results back. It's doing the same thing. So I can see electro is the answer. I can look at that and go, is that right? Do I trust that answer? Did it run the query in the right way? The big thing is you've always got that show code option. And we're still in this early days of this conversational analytics where people don't necessarily trust it. Because we've gone through this wave of the early stages of large language models where they hallucinated. They weren't grounded. Something could tell you something, and you're like, yeah, but is it true? And so we're very much in the establishing trust phase of conversational analytics, where it's proving it's working. It's saying, here's the answer, but this is how I worked it out. Can you please check it and make sure it makes sense? So while we're in this early days, you're kind of expecting the first parts of Genie to be your data analysts who actually know the answer. They know what the SQL should look like. They can glance at that and go, no, that's crazy. Why have you done that? That's entirely wrong. So you've got this like little prove it's working kind of thing in the early days, trying to show that. And then you can ask follow-up questions, you can dig into it, you can start interacting, you can go, well, okay, that's interesting, but give me some more data. I don't like the fact it just gave me the one. So I can say, show me all of the gladiators. Right. And this is different. It's important to know that this is different to We had natural language Q&A. Things like Power BI had Q&A in there, and you could go in and write something in, it would generate a chart for you. But you had to get the semantics perfect. You had to give it the exact name of the column, and you had to be very specific. Essentially, you kind of had to learn the skill of how to ask the question in the right way. The point of this, because it's going through an interpreter, it's going through a large language model, it can understand semantics, it can understand similarity, it can handle a bit of vagueness and figure it out. There we go. So I've done some follow-up queries, I've dug into it, I can have a play. Not particularly exciting, but gives you that first flavor of the kind of things that we're talking about. So, when are we not going to be using this? I mean, for me, the reason dashboards are not dead, imagine it, if I've got this dashboard which has 20 different KPIs on there, and I can open that, I can just get a picture of it in the morning, I can see one of them's red, I go, oh, that's where I need to focus my attention. And if I need to do that every day, I'm actually going to go and log in and ask the same question every day to get that answer? No, it's going to take me a lot longer. There's still absolutely valid uses for allowing you to quickly decide where to focus your attention is a classic, amazing use case of dashboards that conversational analytics is not going to replace. If I'm working in a manufacturing office and I've got a TV wall on the screen giving me a live telemetry how things are going, I'm not going to replace that with something where someone has to go and interact and ask questions. Passive analytics is a thing that's still going to be around for dashboarding. Dashboards are not going away. This is just a new tool that we have to kind of put in our arsenal. I can take a glance at something and understand something from dashboards without having to know. If I didn't know the question I wanted to ask, dashboards can kind of give me the insight to go, ooh, there's something interesting there. Now I've got a follow-up question. So dashboards are not dead in the slightest. But when conversational analytics is useful, quick turnaround, repeated questions, repeated follow-up, dig into that. What about that? What about that? Or actually, say I'm the data analyst. Say my executive has looked at a dashboard, has asked me a question. I don't have a pre-canned report ready. I have to go and write some SQL to actually get the answer. Well, actually, I can just ask this question and pre-generate some SQL. I can use it to speed up my own development workflows. Absolutely something I can do. Now, final one. Oh, I've gone all philosophical. It's a way of connecting to data consumers at a deeper level. Who actually believes that? Oh, I will win you round. It's very hard because dashboards are fundamentally boring. It's a thing about dashboards. Like if you read things like Stephen Few, Edward Tufte, some of the visionaries with original dashboard design, the whole point of a good dashboard is to not clutter it. You don't want to have lots of images. You don't want to have things that distract the eye because that actually slows down visual comprehension. A good dashboard is nice and clean and crisp. Now, the bad thing about that is that means a good dashboard is inherently dull. It's not particularly exciting. And when we get into data culture and actually how you get people to engage with a data product more, engagement is a real thing that's quite hard to win round if you're going, here is a well-designed dashboard, and your entire business goes, cool. Now, actually, things that we can do with conversational analytics, because they're much more engaged, they're having a conversation, we can actually find ways to just get them hooked. We can give them a better experience. We can approach them at a more human level. So that, for me, is one of the big things that this is actually going to do that we haven't been able to do really before. So no, dashboards are not dead, but we've got a new way of working. We've got new tools that we can go and do. So not just generic, conversational, actual Databricks AI BI Genie, stuff we need to know about that. Well, yes, it's built directly to Databricks. It's part of Databricks. You pay for it by paying the SQL cluster that goes and runs the query for you. So it can be nice and fairly cheap, especially if you use serverless and it's turned off most of the time. It's fairly straightforward. Essentially, we're going to be in this workflow of I create a Genie space. I tell that Genie space which tables it's looking at. Now, that is important because everyone kind of, when they first start using it, they think of it like it's going to be my enterprise-wide thing that I can just ask any question about any data I have anywhere, and it'll go off and serve it and bring it back. That is not what Genie is doing. It's not what Genie is good at. Genie is good at having a small number of tables focused around a particular problem domain. So a particular star schema, a particular semantic model, a model in your gold curated layer, you build around it. That is what Genie excels at. If you try and put, well, you can't put more than, I think, 25 tables in a single Genie room. And I'm assuming most people have more than 25 tables in their entire data set. So you're creating multiple different Genie rooms. This is my Genie room around supply chain. This is my marketing room. This is my HR room. You're building domain scoped Genie rooms is kind of what we're thinking about. So there's stuff in there. And then, yeah, what do we actually do? Bunch of stuff. The main objects that you use at the moment. Now, this is growing and evolving. Now, I'm annoyed I'm doing this today, not tomorrow, because things are going to change, I'm sure. You pick which tables are in scope. So I create a room. I need to be using Unity Catalog. And I say, here's the tables within Unity that I want in the scope of this particular Genie room. I can then do something, I can do what's called a system prompt or general instructions. I can give it some information that anytime someone asks a question, it almost like appends this as additional context. Now I can do things like say, if this is a certain metric, this is the calculation, I can give it my SQL coding style. Please actually, use camel case, use snake case. I can tell it how to influence the SQL that's generated. I can just give it a bit more context to the instructions. And that's not the user having to know that. That's me as the person setting up. I can just set that so every single user has a similar experience within that room. I can give it some saved queries. So if it tries to run a query and it writes a query and like, no, it's not really done that right, it's not quite understood. The way we do this is actually, here's some SQL I've already got. I can save that. So rather than have to generate that SQL each time, it goes, oh, for that question, I've already got some SQL. I can start to build up the library of known SQL queries that will kind of essentially make performance better over time. I can also have SQL functions. So if I want to have a particular SQL function that it runs, so that it can use to do like the isMember function, it can work out who this person is, a member of a certain group, things I can only really do as a function, I can start to register that as well. They are the core building blocks. Again, there's not huge amounts in there for what it can actually do, which is fairly huge. So the whole thing being, obviously, if I go to ChatGPT and ask it, which product made the most revenue, it's like, what product? What are you talking about? Where's the data? It doesn't know anything, which is why we're doing this. So what it actually does, what Genie's doing with that system information, with Unity Catalog, with all its other bits, it's essentially getting the question my user's asking, and essentially doing prompt stuffing, getting a load of extra context and passing all of that across at once. So the large language model doesn't know my data. The large language model has not been trained on my data, it does not been trained on my schema. At the point the question goes in, I'm adding all of this context. Based on everything you know here, give me the answer. Now, I could technically do that. I could go to ChatGPT and write the longest prompt in the world, and that would give me the same response, right? That would generate SQL for me. So essentially, at the point you run the query, it's going, based on tables with these schemas, with this Unity Catalog metadata, so it's passing in the comments, it's passing in descriptions, it's passing in any categorization tags, it's passing in the usage behavior with this particular question, and with that extra context, that system prompt, the hints I've given it, generate some SQL for me. That's all it's doing. It's with a load of context and generating SQL to answer a question. Make sense? See? It's easy. It's fine. So let's do a little bit of that. We'll go nice and quick. How do we actually create a room? So creating this, I did it from scratch. So I went into my Unity Catalog. And again, it's whether or not you do this based on some data. I mean, realistically, we expect most people will have a nice curated data set. They've gone through a design. They've got a star schema, hooray, Kimball, all of that kind of stuff. Here, I'm being kind of lazy. I've just created a schema. And I'm going to go into my thing. I'm going to add a new table. I'm going to go browse and grab just a random CSV, because that's how we do all data, right? There we go. I'm going to upload that in. Let it do some thinking for a minute, add that in as a table. Now, if I do that just on its own, it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be great, because I've not done any of the metadata, I've not done any of the governance, I've not given it descriptions, I've not given it enough of a chance to understand the context of any of this stuff. So if that table just went in as it is, sure, it's got some stuff, it's got some information, but it's not as good as it could be. So if I go to a table I've actually done some more stuff with, I'll go to my nice pre-prepared one. I can see I've gone in, I've got some comments in there, I've got some descriptions, I've done some data typing, and that is all used by the large language model. When it's taken to the side, when I ask, could I get a gladiator? So, well, okay, it now knows that the name column is the gladiator's name because I've put that stuff in there. I've given it enough information that it can make better decisions. So the better your Unity catalog, the better governed your data is, the better decisions it's going to make. Data governance is cool again. No? Well, I think data governance is cool. This is a sort of driver. This is a reason why things should actually get better. So I can then go over to Genie and say, cool, I want to make a new Genie space around that data. It gives me a choice of what data I should use. So I should go, give me my whole catalog. I can go and browse in here, go find that table that we've added. And again, I could tick multiple tables in here. But realistically, you want to keep it small scope. Max 25 currently. Do you want to be looking at 5, 10 tables? Essentially, a fact and some dimensions is the kind of good thing to be thinking of. And say, yeah, go and create that. It's not going to use that. It's going to create just a blank room for me. It's going to generate some questions for me by default. So it's just looking at that and going, well, based on the thing you've added, I'm going to suggest some queries that you can have in there. Now, I can go and change that. I can go and give that its own information. So I can have a play in this little settings I've got over here. Yes, I can see the data that's currently in scope. I can go and add more tables to it. I can adjust it as I go. I can go into my instructions. So I can go and actually do some other stuff. I can add some more context. I can say, answer all questions. Ooh, typing in the style of a pirate. There we go. And now any responses it will give, it will actually generate it as a ahoy there matey kind of thing, because I want to give it some kind of personality. Any of those instructions I can add, and that will just be automatically added to any questions people ask. Now there's more serious uses for that, and that's doing things like telling it definitions, telling it, if anyone asks this, say no. If anyone asks for more information, here's the link to the wiki article, and you can go and direct people. You can do loads of stuff using that general instructions. Or you can be a bit silly. Oh, no, I want to save that, absolutely. And then you can go to your SQL queries, and then I can write some queries. Or I can take responses that's generated and say, just remember that and add that automatically in. So if I go, what are the unique events that gladiators have participated in? Again, it's passing it to the LLM. It's building out that context. It's saying, matey, here be the query fetching your data. See, it's now in pirate mode. And it'll go and do it. So really straightforward to set this thing up, right? There's really not that much in terms of what you need to do to create it. The nuance comes into how do you actually do it properly, and how do you actually do it in such a way that it's more engaging and it works a bit better. So we'll dig more into that stuff in a moment. Okay, so what are the more advanced techniques? And again, it's still fairly early days in the world of Genie. There's going to be more advanced stuff we can do eventually. But for now, I'll talk about these things. I'll talk a bit about the process of data product design. Data products, the hip thing since data mesh made it cool 2 years ago. But we'll talk a bit about how that fits into how we think about data products. Persona crafting, Easter eggs, how you put that little touches of engagement, little hooks to get people more interested and start to actually work with it a bit more. Metric seeding, how we tell it, give it some hints about, well, actually the business definition for this KPI is this, how we go about putting that in there. We'll talk a bit about the Genie API if you want to break out of it. And data sampling is something that's fairly new, which is going to give it a little bit of more of a chance to get things right. We'll talk more about that stuff. So yeah, data products. Who has a data product methodology currently? A couple, not that many. Now, data product or data as a product, right? I mean, you don't have to embrace the whole thing of it. The main thing that gets it for us is, one, you should talk to your business users to design your data model. You should go and actually run some workshops with your business to go, how do you think about things? There's a whole process called BEAM, Business Event Analysis and Modeling, which is exactly that. It's a user stakeholder-based way of building out a conceptual model that you then put your data into, rather than looking at your data and deciding what's a fact, what's a dimension, and then showing it to your business users, and they don't know what it is. So if you're using something like that, one of the key things that we have out the back of that is a bunch of user questions. It's a, well, okay, so if we design this thing and you could answer all these questions, is that success? And they go, yes, that's what I want. And then as good developers, I can use that as acceptance criteria. I can test my model and go, well, I know the questions they want to ask. Does this answer it? So if you've got a design methodology anyway, you can do it. But the problem is, lots of the way we've been designing things, we think as the dashboard as actually the thing we're putting in front of the user. So we go, actually, it doesn't matter what the data model looks like, because they're only going to see the dashboard if they're a big exec and they don't want to be doing their own exploration. This changes it. Suddenly, actually, we've got a second avenue. We've got this another way. They're going to be interacting with the actual data model far more directly than they ever would previously. So actually, the importance of how much sense your data model makes, the naming of things, all of these things which as a data nerd I've always said are amazingly important, but you could kind of get away with ignoring if people just looked at a dashboard, suddenly becomes way more important because they're going to be interacting with it directly. Now, whether or not you treat that as a semantic layer, and that's another layer in your medallion architecture, whether that's just you think about your gold layer a bit more importantly than you used to, either way. But just think about how you're going to be exposing it because people are going to be interacting in a very different way than they used to. Now, the personality piece, again, you saw I could say, well, actually, this one's a pirate, this one's very helpful, this one's a bit sarcastic. You can do that kind of thing. Why would you do it? Well, to kind of give people a better hint about what they're talking to. Because the thing I said in terms of Genie spaces tend to be fairly tightly scoped around a particular problem domain. And we're kind of then expecting a user to go, right, I've got a product question, therefore I'm going to go to this Genie room. Or I've got a supply chain question, I need to go to that Genie room. And we're kind of putting it on them to know which room to go and ask different questions to. Whereas if we can kind of do a little bit of personality, a little bit of persona, a little bit of, well, this is Bob, the product expert, go ask Bob. This is Martha, the marketing expert, go ask Martha. We can try and build it actually to have a slightly different behavior. If one's going to be external facing with customers, we need to be a lot more stringent about guidelines going, you can't answer questions about this. Don't tell them about the schema, how you manage them. The different instructions that we would give depending on the intended audience is going to be slightly different. But also we can give people this idea that they're talking to different helpers. We can like personify it a bit. We can make it more human just by seeding these instructions about how we actually think about it. We can add Easter eggs in there, which I'll show you in a second. But yeah, slightly different ways of working about how we start to pull this stuff together, which is all just what you put inside that German instructions. But it's so important when you're actually trying to do that hook, you're trying to get people engaged with it, you're trying to actually use it for some extra stuff. So the Easter eggs. And this is not a Databricks intended function. It's something I just found that actually worked, that I've been using. So I can do things like, if asked, this is your name, this is what you do, make up a response. Now that's not going to generate SQL. It's not going to run anything. There's nothing in my database to do with this. I'm just putting in a little Easter egg going, if anyone asks you who you are, respond like this. I can refer to images. I can refer to GIFs. If anyone asks you who your favorite gladiator is, show them this picture. And actually, I can kind of sneak things in there. So I can do an AI-generated photo of me as a bodybuilding person in Lycra and hide that inside of my Genie room, right? Now, I'm not saying everything has to be stupid. I could do things like saying, if anyone asks you for more help, give them this link to my knowledge base article. But if anyone asks you a question about product, so actually, this is the marketing Genie space, here's a link to my product Genie space. I can go and actually direct people. I can craft a user experience. Or I can be stupid. It's kind of up to you. But you have this option via that German instructions just to do a little bit more, to make it a little bit more engaging, to make it more fun than a nice crafted dashboard. So yeah, metric seeding. So this is how you currently do metric seeding. So if I wanted it to automatically know how a particular metric works, I can do things like going, profit is defined by unit price times quantity. I can give it some hints. I can tell it some business definitions. The way it currently works, that sits inside German instructions. Last year, at the Data AI Summit last year, they announced a thing called UC metrics, this way of actually saving KPIs and definitions inside a Unity catalog. Now that's going to be coming to Genie, obviously, when that's released. So I expect this to change, but currently the way you do it is inside that German instructions. Now that then means you need to be careful about what you're putting inside there and what you're doing and how it all fits together. That's just the way it works currently. Now, the final thing to be aware of is if it was trying to generate a where statement, if your SQL is going to be select star from here where country equals Florida is the example on the website, country equals something, and it has to know what the term is going to be. It needs to know the contents of that column. But as I told you at the start, it never sees the data. So how is it going to know what to put in that filter statement if it's never actually seen your data? Well, that's where this brand new thing, this is in public preview currently, you can tell it to sample your data. You can say, actually, it's okay for you to run a query, build out a value dictionary, and then if someone says where the country is going to be Florida, and it goes, oh, well, actually, these code, so it's just FL, It knows that because it can sample your data. You have to make the deliberate choice to turn that on, and you need to be aware that means your data is being sent to a large language model and pulled back. And if you want that to happen, great, it'll make your queries better. If you don't want that to happen, you need to make sure that's not turned off. But that's a function that you can do. So you can do a bit more. So Gladiator, it's not going to be Marcus Aurelius, it's going to be Jet. Didn't understand that I was talking about a TV show, not actual gladiators. Whatever example you want to use, right? So data sampling, big, new, important part. So one of the interesting things, one of the things that is honestly fairly new, it's fairly immature, is actually how you go about productionization. How do you get this from a toy that I've kind of built and put in front of people to actually, this is out there, used by the business, I've rolled it out to 1,000 people. What's that journey look like? And it's a little bit of like iteration. It's kind of a slowly growing set. So at first, it's just me, the developer. So I'm built a Genie room. And as I said, I've got my acceptance criteria. I've worked with the business. I've talked to people. I know the kind of questions they're trying to answer. I can be running those queries, checking the responses, sanity checking it, make sure it makes sense. I can do enough setup on my own that I can tick it and go, yeah, I think this is going to be useful for people. Then the best thing to do is to get a small group of expert users, people who are going to understand the SQL. They're going to be able to eyeball it and go, no, that's garbage, that's not right. They're going to be able to tick it and go, yes, that's good, but save that because I want it to use that same query all the time. So essentially, you tend to have this kind of beta period. You have this period of being used where you're in this constant feedback loop. And the important thing with the feedback loop, I'll come back, we'll nip out for a second. So when I've got this answer here, I've got that question down at the bottom. Is this correct? Yes, no, or review it. So when you've got that small group who are testing it, they're ticking things going, yes, that's right. No, that's not right. That is wrong. Or, I'm not really sure about that. That needs to be reviewed. Can you take a look at it? And then me as an admin, I've got my monitoring screen. I can go and see the questions that they've answered, and I can get it flagged of which ones were good, which ones were bad, which ones need review. So when I've got my beta testers, when they're in this period of going in and constantly looking at it and questioning it, I can be just keeping an eye on it going, oh, there's something that wasn't right. Oh, okay, it used the wrong SQL. I'll fix that. I'll add that as an instruction. But that feedback loop is super important to just get it right before you put it out in front of everybody. Because the worst thing with this, if you're using this with users who aren't particularly SQL savvy, if they're not going to be able to look at that SQL query, and they never want to look at a SQL query, you're going to have a bad time if you put it in front of them. So this is the kind of like interesting time when people who do have the skills are vetting it, they're checking it, they're getting it right. So that tick of it saying, yes, this is right, no, that's not right, yes, this needs review, super important before you do a wider rollout. And then you put it out to the world and you say, yes, we can now let people loose at it. But it's not finished. You still have to have that feedback cycle. Who's going to own it? Who's going to be monitoring it? Who's going to be keeping an eye on it and looking at it? Because honestly, if people go in there and they flag it and say, no, that's not good, and then they go in the next week and it still does the same thing, they're not going to engage. You're going to lose faith. This only works if it's an active development kind of thing. It does mean it's very different to how we traditionally develop things. It's not this thing that goes through a formal dev, test, prod, productionization thing, and then when it's in prod, it's just left and it's done. It's no, I don't care about it now, it's in production. It is a living thing that needs that monitoring, it needs iterations, it needs adjustments as it goes. So the dev life cycles is more data ops style. It's a thing you build in prod, you maintain and look after in prod, you then look after and kind of have someone actively looking at you. You have a team of people. Now you can set alerts and things. I can be pinged the moment someone says no if it gets to the point when it's really rare. But having those ideas is things that we actually look at. Well aware of time. I'm not going to dig in too much into the bits. I want to talk best practices. So we talked, yes, tight data focus, data space per product. There's a thing they announced at the keynote this morning, is one of the things in agent bricks is actually you can make an agent that sits atop multiple Genie spaces. So actually, we're going to be able to give people the generic, I'm going to answer everything, but you still need to have designed each of the individual Genie spaces that then answers the question. So if you don't want to teach your users to know to ask Bob or Martha or whoever it needs to be, yeah, you can go to a generic person who will answer it for them, but you still have to have your Genie spaces designed. Start small, iterate, kind of makes sense. Don't try and answer every single question. Make something that is actually the expert in a particular domain, get that working. And Unity Catalog, it's going to be so much better if you've got good data governance. If you've got relationships defined, it's going to do better joins for you. If you're using foreign keys and primary keys inside of your Unity catalog, it's going to use it. It's going to understand it. As much of UC as you are using, you'll have a better time if this thing is set up. Final thing I want to whip through. There's some kind of common errors people come across when they're first starting. Overlapping tables is just going to confuse it. So if I've given it 5 tables and they've all got very similar data and they've got the same column names, the chance it's going to pick the wrong column is quite high. So the more scope, the more control, the more design I can make the data model it's going to use, the better. So if you've got like a medallion architecture and you try and shove this over your raw tables, it's just not going to have a great chance of getting things right. The better curated your data is, the better chance it's going to have. You can do it across any old data, but it's better if it's designed. Filtering problems, again, it doesn't necessarily know the values. Data sampling will fix that, it will make it better. If you can't use data sampling, you can put something in your instructions to go, if people query on this, it's in the ISO 2021 standard. You can give it hints, but it's normally to do with the fact that it's not done data sampling and you can turn it on. Incorrect joins, if it just tries to join things and it just doesn't work, foreign keys will fix that. And if it really doesn't work, you can write the query yourself, save that as an instruction, and then it's going to use that instead. Incorrect KPIs, again, we've got metric seeding. We can write out our general instructions. If you keep seeing it do things wrong, you can get on top of it. Be very careful. There is one thing that Genie, which for me is awful. But it's not from a technically awful thing. It's from a philosophically awful thing. In that if I have a business user and they ask for something that it doesn't know about. So if they said, what is my propensity to buy for a particular thing? If I give it a KPI, if I give it a metric and it doesn't know, it's going to ask me, the user, for clarification. So if I said, what's my top performing product? And it goes, well, what do you mean by top performing? Is that revenue? Is that units sold? Is that profit? And it will ask me in the chat for some help. And I can respond and say, oh, by top performing, I mean revenue. And then for the rest of that chat window, it will use that definition. Now, if a different user in the same Genie space started a new chat and asked the same question, it would ask them for clarification. And then I've currently got 2 different people who are using a different definition of a metric. So be careful, because they're not going to be interrupted. They can get their answer. It's a nice, interactive, engaging way, but you could lead to people using different definitions if they supply the definitions themselves. Now, you can see that in the monitoring. You can see the conversation that was had. You can be on top of it, but you have to be looking out for it. So a little word of warning about metrics and things. Metrics coming into UC will help that. It's going to get better. Query performance is just normal SQL in Databricks query performing. So making sure you got delta tables, making sure they're optimized, making sure all liquid clustering's on, all of that good stuff. Anything you normally do to speed up a query, it's exactly the same. Because Genie's just running a query for you, so you can make it faster. The final point, token limits. So if you're talking to a large language model and you're writing your prompt, you get to a point when you run out of space, you can't fit any more information in there. And if you think about all the things it's sending to Genie, the Unity catalog metadata, the lineage, the previous queries, all of the instructions that you've written, you can reach a point when it goes token limit exceeded, because you just tried to stuff too much into a single prompt. Again, you're only going to do that if you've got too many tables in there, you've got too many columns there, you've got massively verbose instructions. You can reach a point when you hit it. Now, we don't see that very often, especially if you're going at it from a mindset of design some good scope, make it quite deliberate about the question you wanted to answer. If you try and do something too big, you'll hit a token limit, and you'll just need to reduce the columns, reduce the instructions, and pare things down, and they don't work again. Cool. Appreciate that. It was a mad rant and ramble about lots of different stuff. I wanted to focus on the design approach, how you go about getting it out, because that's the thing not many people are doing. Like actual Genie, actually working with the stuff, is so straightforward and simple, baked into Databricks. So I'd say just go and try it out. Go and create a Genie space, add some data tables, try some instructions and start working with it is the best way to actually learn how to use it. But thinking about how do you get it into production? How do you go about rolling it out? How do you go about engaging with users? It's the stuff we don't see anyone actually consider. They just put it out in the world and they go, oh, it's not really working. Because you need to have that approach. Cool. Appreciate we're bang on time. I'll dive outside if there's any follow-up questions, but otherwise, thank you.